Before I get into the meat and potatoes of the topic, I'd like to offer the quick disclaimer that I also think that encouraging emotional restraint in women would be a good idea. The truth is that no self-respecting human, no matter what genitals or identity they have, should want to be a slave to their passions or to their shames. But when it comes to men in the modern age, self-restraint is, for some reason, actively discouraged. The response to the pursuit of Stoicism as a personal life philosophy in the MGTOW circles has been to accuse them of toxic masculinity, or even nonsensically of racism, because damn near everything good these days is considered a white supremacy. But Stoicism is a philosophy that encourages mastery over one's emotions, using logic and analysis to confront your own feelings, to understand their roots, and through understanding, to limit the sway that they hold over the decisions that you make. As I say, I think that everyone could benefit from the study and the incorporation of elements of Stoicism. Emotional management is partially why I am in favor of men seeking therapy. Bear in mind that modern therapy is actually a descendant of classical Stoic philosophy. And while I know that a lot of guys aren't completely comfortable with therapists, the fact is that our emotions do exist, whether we're comfortable with them or not. And a therapist provides a consequence-free release valve for vulnerable emotions and instincts that, if not regulated, could rot you from the inside out, but that if expressed too openly and too frequently, could come back to haunt you. It is not weak to have emotions, but it is weak to allow them to rule you, and they'll rule you just as quickly through your ignorance of them as they will through your indulgence of them. And particularly if you're a man, weakness can lead to disaster. And that brings me to the reason that I think emotional restraint in general, and Stoicism in particular, are specifically beneficial to the average man. Two overarching reasons, to be exact: protecting yourself and protecting others. Men are constantly making stupid, self-destructive decisions in the pursuit of pussy and the preservation of ego. For example, whether it's keeping quiet when marriage contracts are drawn up, or believing her when she says she's on the pill, these are short-sighted decisions to suit short-term emotional goals, but that can potentially destroy a man's life. I've heard stories of old men who'd spent 30-odd years raising children they then learned weren't theirs, or even men paying child support for the illegitimate children of the guys she cheated with. And we've all heard horror stories about men losing their incomes, their children, and their assets in brutal, one-sided divorces. And what are the emotional goals that these sacrifices were made to pursue? Generally, he wants to avoid upsetting her, so that she will not withdraw access to herself and force him to confront all the complicated feelings that come with rejection. Now, that might sound like an oversimplification, but a lot of the time that's what it comes down to. Simply put, if men do not control their emotions, they risk being completely outgunned and bullied by more emotionally controlled or callous people in their lives. And this will often mean being bullied by the woman in their lives. And this is not because women are evil, it's just chemistry. The hypothalamus of the female brain produces far more oxytocin than that of the male brain, and the interaction between estrogen and oxytocin in the female brain produces a relaxing effect, whereas the interaction between testosterone and oxytocin in the male brain produces aggression. Compound this with the fact that the areas of the brain that regulate aggression are more well developed and larger in women than they are in men, and you end up with a situation in which women's emotional muscles are as well developed for superiority as are men's physical muscles. Think about the Order of the White Feather. This was a group of British women during the First World War whose purpose it was to accuse unenlisted men of cowardice in an attempt to shame them into facing the human meat grinder that was World War I. World War I, mind you. Not the one fought against the Nazis, but the one fought because some random European diplomat with a royal title got himself assassinated. Now imagine that, finding yourself gassed, dismembered, or shot and left to die in the mud on some pointless foreign battlefield, all because you lacked the emotional fortitude to resist the shaming of strangers focused through the gaze of a woman. And it is that sense of shame that is at the core of almost all of men's problems. It's used to control us, but it also pushes us to predictable edges. Hell, look at the suicide rates of men compared to women if you want an example of why modern men need the emotional control, resilience, and management offered by Stoicism. And as the feminists love to remind us, if we're not hurting ourselves, we're hurting other people. Which brings us to the next point. The elephant in the room is obviously domestic violence. It's a messed up topic because, as Bill Burr so eloquently points out, you're not really allowed to have an honest conversation about it.
Really is. That's the thing. I hate that saying there's no reason. Obviously, I'm not saying to hit a woman, but saying there's no reason, I think that's crazy. When you say there's no reason, that kills any sort of examination as to how two people ended up at that place. If you say there's no reason, you cut out the build-up, you're just left with the act. How are you going to solve it if you don't figure it out? Look how awkward it is in here right now. I said you shouldn't hit a woman. I'm just saying, how come you can't ask questions? You can only ask questions about what the guy did. You can never ask about the woman. Why is that?
The sweeping assumption made in many societies, particularly those influenced by the West, is that in any domestic conflict between a man and a woman, the man is likely at fault if he does anything but shut up, sit back, and take it. But anyone who's been in a relationship with a woman knows that's often bullshit. We all have our breaking point, and oftentimes the woman you're in a relationship with will seem to have been designed to find yours. That's not an easy deal when you already feel broken by work, family, and whatever else might be going wrong in your life. And the thing that none of us is allowed to publicly say without intense backlash is that sometimes it's understandable that a dude lashed out. Not good or positive in any way, but understandable, predictable even. And it's not about whether or not anyone deserves it. Very rarely does anyone deserve violence inflicted upon them. It's about whether or not circumstances made it inevitable. Remember, an emotionally unarmed and unrestrained man is a dangerous man, because he only has one way to deal with threats, even emotional ones, and that's with aggression, sometimes physical. For many men, it can take an emotional toll simply trying to align society's expectation of the treatment of women, for example, with the treatment that their behavior would sometimes actually appear to encourage. And the shame or dissonance that forms in that gap between the society and the self can drive a person to bad places. When pushed too far, men tend to either give up and break, or we lash out. And Stoicism provides a third option. But in a world in which men are encouraged to emotionally indulge ourselves to too great a degree, some of us are simply going to pile the bodies up. Let's face facts. For better or worse, men are responsible for pretty much every significant achievement of the human race. Be it war, math, or life-multiplying innovations, men were responsible. Irrigation and agriculture, science and technology, it doesn't matter the field or the contribution, chances are that if it matters, a man did it. And this is partially because we're emboldened by the twin orbs of the organ of glory that dangles between our legs, and the status-seeking chemical cocktail of competition that they pump through our veins. We exist on the intellectual extremes of the IQ bell curve, and the structure of our brains means that while we're designed for problem solving, we respond to stress with more aggression than do women. And on average, our more robust and efficient physiologies means that we live in a completely different physical world to our female counterparts. This is reality, and we all have a responsibility to reality, whether we like it or not. In his book, Violence, Reflections on a National Epidemic, James Gilligan, MD, a man who literally made the study of violence his academic life's work, says of male violence the following: "I have yet to see a serious act of violence that was not provoked by the experience of feeling shamed and humiliated, disrespected and ridiculed, and that did not represent the attempt to prevent or undo that loss of face, no matter how severe the punishment, even if it includes death." Think about that the next time you see someone saying men are trash or judging all men for the actions taken by a small number. If every act of male violence is a response to shame, then what exactly do activists hope to achieve by not only shaming all boys and the men they will grow into, but also shaming the very philosophical and intellectual tools that we could use to healthily understand and process that shame? Anyway, that's all I've got to say about that right now. Remember guys, protect yourself, protect others, control your emotions lest they be used to control you. Also, hit like and hit subscribe, and I will catch you guys later. Cheers.